Hey guys and welcome to a new What If. I hope you enjoy and let's get into this. Izuku bounced in his seat at the quirk doctor's office, his little legs swinging excitedly. A huge, goofy grin stretched across his face. Today was the day. Today he would finally learn what amazing power he had, the power that would let him become the greatest hero, just like All Might. He kept glancing at his mom, Inko, who smiled back, a little nervous but trying to be just as happy as he was. "All right, young man," the doctor said, looking at the x-rays. Izuku held his breath, his heart thumping like a drum. "Well, I'm very sorry to tell you this, but it seems young Izuku here is quirkless." The words hit Izuku like a punch to the gut. His smile vanished, his eyes wide with disbelief. Quirkless? That couldn't be right. How could he be a hero without a quirk? The bright, hopeful world he had imagined just moments ago seemed to crumble around him. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked at his mom, her own face etched with sadness. That night, Izuku lay in his bed, his eyes red and puffy from crying. Every hero he admired, every amazing feat he dreamed of doing, felt impossible now. He squeezed his eyes shut, wishing, just wishing, things could be different. Then, everything went dark. When Izuku opened his eyes again, the familiar glow of his All Might nightlight was gone. Instead, he found himself standing in a strange, shadowy forest. Tall trees loomed around him, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. A cool breeze rustled the leaves, and the air smelled damp and earthy. "Ha! Where am I?" he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. He looked around, confused and a little scared. Suddenly, in the distance, between the trees, he saw it. A large wolf, its fur the color of storm clouds, its eyes glowing with a fierce yellow light. It hadn't noticed him yet, but Izuku's heart pounded in his chest. A real wolf! What was he supposed to do? He quickly scrambled behind the thick trunk of a nearby tree, his small body shaking. Just then, a strange, robotic voice echoed through the forest, seeming to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Trail 1 of 5 initiated for candidate assessment." Izuku peeked out from behind the tree, his eyes wide with surprise. What was that? First objective, candidate must take down the gray wolf. Failure to complete this objective will result in trial termination. Candidate will be assessed again in the subsequent cycle same date next year. Izuku's eyes widened even further. Take down a wolf? He was just a quirkless 4-year-old. How was he supposed to do that? He huddled behind the tree, his mind racing. This wasn't real, was it? It had to be a dream, a very strange and scary dream. But the robotic voice sounded so real, so cold and, well, robotic. He peeked again at the wolf, which had now started to sniff the ground, slowly moving in his direction. Fear clenched in Izuku's stomach. He had to do something. But what? He was just Izuku, quirkless, scared, and hiding behind a tree. As Izuku trembled behind the tree, a translucent blue screen suddenly flickered into existence right in front of his face. It was like something straight out of one of his hero video games. At the top, it clearly read, "Candidate, Izuku Midoriya. Level 1. Below his name were a series of stats. Strength, 2, Speed, 3, Stamina, 2, Intelligence, 3, Dexterity, 2. Underneath the stats, there was a section labeled, Skills, None. Izuku stared at the screen, his fear momentarily forgotten in a wave of confusion. Could this be his quirk? It was so strange, not like anything he'd ever heard of. But the robotic voice, the wolf, it all felt so real. Just as he was trying to make sense of the glowing blue screen, a low growl rumbled beside him. Izuku's head snapped to the side, and his eyes went wide with terror. The gray wolf was right there, its yellow eyes fixed on him. It must have circled around the tree. With a yelp of fright, Izuku scrambled backward, his small hands pushing against the forest floor as he tried to crawl away. The wolf crouched low to the ground, its muscles bunching, ready to pounce. Panic surged through Izuku. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the worst. In that moment of pure fear, something primal took over. He didn't think, he just bolted. He scrambled to his feet and ran blindly through the trees, his little legs pumping as fast as they could. He could hear the wolf's heavy paws thudding behind him, the snarls echoing in the strange forest. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Izuku gasped, his eyes snapping open. He was back in his own bed, the familiar All Might poster smiling down at him in the soft morning light. He was drenched in sweat, his heart still racing a mile a minute. It had all felt so incredibly real. Just as he was trying to catch his breath and convince himself it was just a nightmare, the same cold, robotic voice echoed in his room, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Candidate assessment failed. Objective not achieved. Candidate will be trailed again in the subsequent cycle. Izuku sat up in bed, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. It wasn't just a dream. It was something else. Something that would happen again. Next year. And he had to face that wolf. He had to, somehow, take it down. A few weeks crawled by, each day feeling both normal and strangely colored by the memory of the forest and the robotic voice. Every time Izuku closed his eyes at night, a little flicker of anxiety would run through him. He couldn't shake the feeling that the wolf, that terrifying creature, was waiting for him. During the day, while other kids played heroes and villains with their flashy quirks, Izuku found himself more and more absorbed in his notebook. He titled a new section The Trial Dream and meticulously wrote down everything he could remember. The shadowy trees, the damp smell, the glowing yellow eyes of the wolf, the cold, mechanical sound of the voice, and most importantly, the blue screen. He drew a detailed picture of the stat screen, noting down the numbers next to strength, speed, stamina, intelligence, and dexterity. They're all so low, he mumbled to himself, feeling a little discouraged. Then he drew the skills, none section. I need skills, he thought, his brow furrowed in concentration. The idea about his clothes being there sparked a new train of thought. He remembered he was wearing his All Might t-shirt and his favorite red shorts in the dream. If my clothes went with me, he muttered, tapping his pencil against the page, then maybe other things can too? His eyes lit up. What if he was holding something when he fell asleep? Would it appear with him in the dream? A stick? A toy? He scribbled down this new theory in his notebook, underlining it twice. Hypothesis: objects held while falling asleep may transfer to the trial dream. This gave him a sliver of hope, a tiny bit of control in this strange, scary situation. If he couldn't suddenly get a real quirk, maybe he could use this dream thing to become stronger in some way. Maybe, just maybe, he could figure out how to beat that wolf next year. As a year passes, the familiar date arrived, marked in Deku's secret trial dream section of his notebook with a big, slightly shaky circle. All day at school, he couldn't quite focus on lessons, his mind buzzing with a mixture of fear and determination. He had a plan, a small one, but it was better than nothing. That evening, after his bath and tucked snugly into bed, Deku clutched the small, slightly worn baseball bat he usually used for imaginary hero training in the park. He'd snuck it into his room and hid it under his blanket, hoping his mom wouldn't notice. As his eyelids grew heavy, he held onto it tight, focusing all his will on the shadowy forest. Then, just like before, the darkness shifted, and the familiar scent of damp earth filled his nostrils. He was back in the same eerie forest, the tall trees casting long, distorted shadows in the dim light. The cold, robotic voice echoed through the trees once more. Candidate is being trailed again. Trail 1 out of 5, eliminate the gray wolf. Deku's heart pounded in his chest, but this time, there was a flicker of something else mixed with the fear, resolve. He gripped the bat tighter. He wasn't completely defenseless this time. He scanned the area, his eyes wide but searching. And there it was, just as he remembered, a couple of 100 feet away. The gray wolf, its yellow eyes gleaming in the dim light, was sniffing the ground, its powerful form a stark reminder of the terror from last year. Deku immediately ducked behind the nearest thick tree trunk, his small body pressed against the rough bark. He took a few deep breaths, trying to calm his racing heart. He needed to think. Just like All Might always said, even in the face of danger, a hero has to be smart. As he huddled behind the tree, the familiar blue screen flickered into existence before his eyes. He quickly scanned the stats. Candidate, Izuku Midoriya. Level 1, Strength, 2, Speed, 3, Stamina, 3, Intelligence, 4, Dexterity, 2. Skills, none. His eyes widened slightly. His stamina and intelligence had gone up by 1. Maybe just surviving the first encounter, even though he failed the objective, had made him a little bit stronger, a little bit smarter about the situation. Deku took a deep breath, his small hands white-knuckled around the baseball bat. He peeked out from behind the tree, his eyes fixed on the gray wolf. It was still sniffing the ground, seemingly unaware of his presence. Carefully, slowly, Deku crept out from behind the tree, taking small, quiet steps. He reached down and picked up a small, smooth stone. With a quick flick of his wrist, he tossed the stone towards a different cluster of trees, making sure it landed with a noticeable thump. The wolf's head snapped up, its yellow eyes swiveling towards the sound. This was his chance. Deku took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a split second, and then burst out from behind the tree, charging towards the wolf with a determined yell. He swung the bat with all his might, aiming for the wolf's side. Thwack! The bat connected, but it felt like hitting a very furry, solid wall. The wolf barely even flinched. It looked at Deku with mild annoyance, as if a fly had just buzzed past its ear. The bat had done absolutely nothing. Panic flared in Deku's chest. He quickly dropped the useless bat and turned to run, his little legs pumping as fast as they could. But the wolf was much faster. With a powerful leap, it charged into Deku, knocking him off his feet with a painful oof. As he lay on the ground, his vision starting to blur, he saw something strange above the wolf. A glowing name tag appeared, hovering in the air, Grey Wolf, and underneath it, Level 3. Then, the wolf's sharp claws flashed down towards him. Everything went black. Deku gasped, bolting upright in his bed, covered in a cold sweat. The memory of the claws was terrifyingly real. The cold, robotic voice echoed in his room. Candidate assessment, failed. Objective not achieved. However, candidate performance shows improvement compared to the previous trial. Candidate shall be trailed again in the subsequent cycle but has earned a reward of 3 stat points and the skill, Blunt Weapons Mastery Level 1. The familiar blue screen flickered into existence in front of him. This time, there was a new section under his stats. Skills, Blunt Weapons Mastery Level 1. 0% progress to Level 2. And below his stats, a new message flashed. Stat points available, 3. Deku stared at the screen, his mind racing. He had failed again, but he had done better. He had a skill now. And he could make himself stronger with these stat points. This dream wasn't just a nightmare, it was some kind of training? Deku stared at the stat points available, 3, on the blue screen, his mind buzzing with possibilities. He thought back to the fight with the wolf. He was too slow, too weak. The bat felt heavy and useless. Strength. He muttered to himself, his eyes fixed on the Strength 2 stat. I definitely need more strength. He imagined hitting the wolf again, but this time with more power behind it. He mentally clicked the Strength stat twice. The number beside it flickered and changed, Strength 4. And maybe if I'm quicker and more coordinated with the bat, he continued, looking at his Dexterity 2, it won't feel so clumsy. He mentally clicked the Dexterity stat once. The number changed again, Dexterity 3. As soon as the last number changed, a strange sensation washed over Deku. It wasn't a big feeling, just a subtle sense of something shifting within him. He looked down at the baseball bat lying beside him on the bed. He picked it up with one hand, something he usually struggled to do comfortably. His eyes widened in surprise. It felt lighter, easier to control. He swung it gently, a small smile creeping onto his face. The movement felt smoother, more natural. Maybe the Blunt Weapons Mastery Level 1 skill is helping too, he whispered excitedly. Then, a huge realization hit him. If the stats and skills he gained in the dream were affecting his real body, didn't that mean he could become a hero? This strange dream, this yearly trial, it wasn't just a scary thing he had to survive. It was a way for him to get stronger, to gain skills, even without a quirk in the real world. A huge grin spread across his face. He pumped his fist in the air. Yes! I can do this! I can become a hero! He did a little victory dance on his bed, his initial fear replaced with a surge of hope and excitement. Suddenly, he stopped, remembering it was still nighttime and his mum was asleep. He clapped his hands over his mouth, his cheeks flushing slightly. He had to be quiet. Taking a deep breath, he calmed himself down, his mind now racing with plans for the next year. He had stat points to think about, a skill to practice with his bat, and a whole year to prepare for the next trial. The dream was still scary, but now it also felt like an opportunity. He carefully placed the bat beside his bed, a determined glint in his eyes. He had a long way to go, but for the first time since the quirk doctor's visit, Izuku Midoriya truly believed that he could still achieve his dream. Okay, let's write this part so it's easy for text-to-speech to read. 3 months went by. During this time, Deku made an amazing discovery. He figured out that he could open his stat screen even when he wasn't in the dream world. All he had to do was really focus and think, open stats, and then poof, the blue screen would appear in front of him. It was like a secret menu only he could see. He'd been working super hard in the real world too, training his body every day. He did lots of running, jumping, and even practiced swinging his bat. Because of all his training, all of his stats had gone up by 1. So now they looked like this. Candidate, Izuku Midoriya. Level 1. Strength, 5, Speed, 4, Stamina, 4, Intelligence, 5, Dexterity, 4. Skills, Blunt Weapons Mastery Level 1, 5% progress to Level 2. Stat points available, 0. Deku looked at his stats with a big smile on his face. He was actually getting stronger. And his blunt weapons mastery was slowly going up. He imagined how much better he'd be with the bat when it reached level 2. Inside the house, through the kitchen window, Inko watched Deku in the garden. He was running around, pretending to fight imaginary villains with his bat, a huge grin on his face. She smiled softly, a warm feeling in her chest. Even after the doctor's news, her little Izuku still had so much determination to become a hero. She had no idea about the secret dream world he was battling in, but she was so proud of his spirit. Izuku, she called out, her voice clear and cheerful. Breakfast is ready. Deku ate his breakfast with a happy smile, chatting excitedly with his mom about his favorite All Might episode from last night. He felt so much more energetic these days. Getting ready for school was quicker too, he could run just a little bit faster than before. As he walked to school, he saw Kakin showing off his explosive quirk to a group of kids. Bang! Pop! Little explosions erupted from his hands, making the other kids cheer. Deku watched from a distance. Ever since Kakin got his powerful quirk, things had changed between them. Kakin was louder, more confident, and, well, a bit meaner. Deku mostly tried to stay out of his way now. It was easier that way. He had his own secret training to focus on anyway. As Deku was leaving school, his eyes caught sight of Kakin and a couple of his friends cornering another kid. Kakin had his usual angry look on his face, and the other kid looked really scared. Without even thinking about it, Deku's legs started moving. He knew it wasn't right, what Kakin was doing. He walked right up to Kakin and, maybe a little nervously, reached out and gently grabbed his shoulder. Kakin, Deku said, trying to keep his voice steady, you should stop it. Leave him alone. Kakin whipped around, his eyes blazing. Huh, he snarled, looking down at Deku. Then his face twisted into a mean smirk. Well. Look who it is. Deku the quirkless wonder trying to play hero? Before Deku could even say anything else, Kakin let off a small pop from his hand, a tiny explosion right in front of Deku. The force of it pushed Deku backward, making him stumble and fall. A quirkless loser like you should know your place. Kakin yelled, his voice full of scorn. Stay out of my way if you know what's good for you. He then turned back to the other kid, leaving Deku sitting on the ground, a little shaken but his eyes still full of determination. Deku pushed himself up from the ground, his knees a little scraped, but his eyes burned with a new kind of fire. He looked at Kaken, who was sneering down at him, and a wave of determination washed over him. He wouldn't back down. Not anymore. Taking a deep breath, Deku walked forward again, his steps firm. He reached out and grabbed Kaken's shoulder. This time his grip was much stronger, surprising even himself. Kaken's eyes widened in anger, and he instantly went to blast Deku in the face again, a spark already igniting in his palm. But Deku was ready. His mind, sharpened by his dream trials and his own training, worked quickly. He saw the flicker of the explosion and reacted without thinking. He grabbed Kaken's hand, stopping it just inches from his face, and in the same swift motion, he launched his knee upwards, hitting Kaken hard in the gut. Ugh! Kaken gasped, stumbling backward, clutching his stomach. The small explosion fizzled out harmlessly. Deku stood his ground, his eyes fixed on Kaken. They weren't filled with fear anymore, but with a sharp, unwavering resolve. Kaken stared back, his usual arrogance replaced with a flash of shock and then pure, unadulterated rage. You damn Deku! Kaken roared, his voice filled with fury. Explosions started to crackle and pop in his hands, growing bigger and brighter. He was charging up for a real attack, shouting a string of angry insults at Deku. You think you can fight me, you useless nobody? I'll blast you into next week. Kaken lunged forward, ready to unleash a barrage of explosions. But Deku's mind was racing. He might not have a flashy quirk, but he was quicker now, more agile. He scanned the ground and his eyes landed on a small, jagged rock. In a split second, he bent down, snatched it up, and with a flick of his wrist, he kicked the rock with surprising force. It flew through the air and hit Kaken squarely on the forehead. Ow! Kaken yelled, his charge faltering as he stumbled backward, momentarily stunned. The force of the impact made him blink and lose his focus. Seeing his chance, Deku didn't hesitate. He knew he couldn't win a direct fight against Kaken's quirk, not yet anyway. But he could get away. He turned and started to run, his legs pumping hard as he put distance between himself and the furious blonde boy. As he ran, he glanced back over his shoulder, his eyes still locked on Kaken, who was now rubbing his forehead and yelling threats. I'll show you, Kaken! Deku called out, his voice filled with a fierce determination that surprised even himself. I will prove you wrong. I will become a hero. Then, he turned and kept running, not stopping until he reached the safety of his own street. He walked the rest of the way home, his mind still buzzing with what had just happened. He knew Kaken would be even angrier now, but a small spark of pride flickered within him. He had stood up for someone, and he hadn't completely backed down. When he got home, he didn't tell his mom anything about the fight. He knew she would worry. He just went to his room, his mind already replaying the events, analyzing what he did right and what he could have done better. The dream trials were tough, but they were making him stronger, not just in the dream world, but here, in real life too. And that gave him a hope he hadn't felt in a long time. He would keep training, keep getting stronger, and one day, he would show everyone, especially Kaken, that even without a quirk, he could become a hero. 2 whole years had flown by. For Deku, who was now 8 years old, those years were filled with secret training, both in the real world and in his yearly dream trials. He had gotten so much stronger. Just by thinking open stats, the familiar blue screen would appear. Right now, it showed. Candidate, Izuku Midoriya. Level 1. Strength, 7, Speed, 6, Stamina, 6, Intelligence, 7, Dexterity, 6. Skills, Blunt Weapons Mastery Level 1, 21% progress to Level 2. Stat points available, 0. Deku smiled. He was definitely getting more powerful. His strength had gone up by 2 since the last trial, making him feel much more solid. His speed and dexterity were better too, which helped with his movements. Even his stamina and intelligence had increased, meaning he could train longer and think more strategically. He was still only level 1 overall, and his blunt weapons mastery was slowly creeping towards level 2, but he could feel the difference. Tonight was the night. The night he always went back to that strange forest. He lay in his bed, clutching his trusty baseball bat. He'd made sure his mom was fast asleep before bringing it into his room. As his eyelids grew heavy, he focused on the shadowy trees, the familiar feeling of the dream pulling him under. He woke up with a start, the damp forest air filling his lungs. Everything looked just as he remembered. And there it was, the same menacing gray wolf, its level 3 glowing above its head, prowling near the base of a tall tree. This time, Deku didn't panic. He had a plan. Quickly but quietly, he scrambled up the sturdy trunk of the tree, his increased strength making the climb much easier than it would have been years ago. Once he was high enough, hidden amongst the leaves, he reached into his pocket. He had thought ahead and grabbed a couple of good-sized stones from the garden before coming to bed. Carefully, he aimed and dropped one of the stones to the forest floor with a soft thump. The gray wolf's head snapped up, its yellow eyes looking towards the sound. It moved towards the fallen stone, its attention completely diverted. This was his moment. Taking a deep breath, Deku pushed off from the branch, using his improved dexterity to control his jump. He plummeted down towards the unsuspecting wolf, his baseball bat held high above his head. He aimed right for the top of its skull, using the full momentum of his fall to deliver a powerful swing. Crack! The sound of the bat connecting with the wolf's head echoed through the silent forest. The crack of the bat hitting the wolf's head made the creature stumble, its footing unsteady. Deku didn't hesitate for a second. He swung the bat again, hitting the disoriented wolf in its legs, then its side. He kept up the attack, trying to keep the wolf off balance. But the gray wolf was still strong. It snapped its jaws, and before Deku could react, it lunged, its teeth sinking into his arm as Deku cried out in pain as the wolf thrashed its head, throwing him away from it. He landed on the ground with a thud, his arm throbbing. Even though he was hurt, Deku wasn't done yet. In a last-ditch effort, his hand fumbled in his pocket. He pulled out a small, dull knife. It was so small he'd barely managed to hide it from Inko. With all his remaining strength, he threw it at the wolf. The knife hit the wolf's side with a soft thunk, piercing its fur and skin. But it didn't seem to do much damage. The wolf just growled and looked down at the knife sticking out of its side, more annoyed than hurt. Then, everything started to fade. Deku felt himself being pulled away, the shadowy forest dissolving around him. He jolted awake in his own bed, his heart racing and his arm aching. The cold, robotic voice echoed in his room. Candidate assessment failed. Objective not achieved. However, candidate performance indicates significant improvement and represents the best performance observed during this cycle. Candidate shall be trailed again in the subsequent cycle but has earned a substantial reward of 5 stat points to allocate and a mystery gift of common level. Suddenly, the familiar blue screen appeared, but this time it looked a little different. Below his stats, a new section had appeared. Inventory, empty. And the message about his stats now said, stat points available, 5. Below that, another message shimmered. Mystery gift, unopened, common. Finally, his blunt weapons mastery had increased a lot. It now read. Skills, blunt weapons mastery level 1, 36% progress to level 2. Deku stared at the screen, his eyes wide with a mix of pain and excitement. He had failed again, but he had done so much better. 5 stat points. And a mystery gift. He wondered what it could be. Since it was common, it probably wasn't anything super amazing, but still. And his blunt weapons mastery was getting closer to level 2. Deku looked at the stat points available, 5, on the screen, his brow furrowed in concentration. Okay, think, Deku, think, he muttered to himself. That wolf was way stronger than me. I need to hit harder. Strength. Yeah, strength will probably let me deal more damage, maybe even push it back. He focused on the strength 7 stat and mentally added 3 points. The number jumped up. Strength 10. Whoa! 10 strength. That's gotta make a difference. Next, he thought about the fight. He got bitten because he wasn't fast enough, and he got thrown around. I need to be a little quicker and tougher, he reasoned. So, 1 point into dexterity to help me move better. He mentally added a point to dexterity 6, making it dexterity 7, and 1 point into stamina so I can keep fighting for longer. He added a point to stamina 6, making it stamina 7. Alright, Deku said to himself, feeling a surge of excitement. 10 strength, 7 speed, 7 stamina, 7 intelligence, and 7 dexterity. That's way better. Now, the inventory, empty, section caught his eye. Inventory, that sounds like where I can keep stuff. He looked at the baseball bat on his bed and the small knife he'd managed to sneak in. He held them both up towards the blue screen, as if offering them to it. Suddenly, both the bat and the knife shimmered and then vanished from his hands, appearing on the blue screen in the inventory section. Below them were some details. Cracked wooden bat, rarity, common description, a well-used wooden baseball bat, showing some signs of wear. Good for swinging. Effects, no special effects. Small utility knife, rarity, common description, a small, everyday knife with a short, somewhat dull blade. Useful for small tasks. Effects, minor chance to inflict a bleed effect on a successful hit against vulnerable targets. Bleed, deals a small amount of damage over a short time. Whoa! Deku exclaimed, his eyes wide. I can keep my stuff in there. That's so cool. And the knife can make enemies bleed a little bit. That could be useful. He then noticed a little coin symbol in the corner of the inventory screen. Ha! A coin? Does that mean there's going to be a shop someday? That would be amazing. Finally, it was time for the mystery gift, unopened, common. A small, slightly glowing stone materialized in his hand. It wasn't very shiny or impressive looking. With bated breath, Deku touched the stone. It shimmered again and then dissolved into tiny sparks of light that flowed into his body. A new skill appeared on his stat screen. Skills, Blunt Weapons Mastery Level 1, 36% progress to Level 2, Skills, Blink Level 1, 0% progress to Level 2, Rarity, Uncommon Description, allows the user to instantly move to any visible location within a 5-meter radius. Momentum from the blink can be used to enhance attacks. Has a 30-second cooldown after each use. Whoa! Blink! Deku gasped. I can teleport a little bit. That's so cool. And using the momentum for stronger attacks? That sounds amazing. Even if it has a cooldown, that could really help me dodge the wolf or get in a surprise attack. He looked at his updated stats and inventory, a huge grin on his face. Even though the dream trials were tough and scary, he was getting stronger, learning new skills, and even getting his own inventory. Maybe, just maybe, he really could become a hero someday. He couldn't wait for the next trial to try out his new abilities. Deku hopped out of bed, the morning sun casting a warm glow through his window. He skipped over to the window, a big grin on his face, and gazed out at the garden. Suddenly, a thought popped into his head. Blink, he whispered, focusing hard. In a blink, literally. He vanished from his spot by the window and reappeared instantly right against the garden fence. His eyes widened with amazement, and he let out a joyful whoop, jumping around excitedly. Whoa! It worked! I can really teleport. Next, he wanted to test his increased strength. He walked over to a few weights he had in the corner of the garden. They were pretty heavy, the kind his mom always told him to be careful around. He reached down and, with a little grunt of effort, lifted one of the heavier ones, with just one hand. It felt surprisingly light. A giant smile spread across his face. Yes. 10 strength is amazing. Just then, the door to the house slid open, and Inko's voice called out, a little worried, Izuku. What are you doing lifting such big weights? You could hurt yourself. Deku quickly dropped the weight, his cheeks flushing slightly. Sorry, Mom, he called back, silently thanking his lucky stars she hadn't seen him teleport. He went inside for breakfast, his mom smiling at him. You're always so determined, Izuku, she said, ruffling his hair. Even after, well, you still train so hard. I'm really proud of you. Deku beamed at her, a warm feeling in his chest. If only she knew the real reason he was getting stronger. School went by in a flash. He felt quicker on his feet during games and even found focusing in class a little easier. As he was walking home, he noticed a girl sitting alone on a bench in the park. She looked about his age, with long, dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and big, intelligent-looking gray eyes. She was wearing a pretty, frilly dress, but her expression was a little sad as she seemed to be playing with a small, intricately folded paper crane by herself. Deku felt a pang of sympathy. He walked over to her and said gently, hi. Are you all right? The girl looked up, a hint of surprise in her eyes. Oh, she said quietly. Yes, I'm fine. Just playing. It looked like you were a little lonely, Deku said, fidgeting with the strap of his backpack. The girl sighed. Well, maybe I am. It's just, making friends is hard. Everyone always seems to, they just want to be around me because of my family's money. They don't really care about me. Her voice sounded a little bit bitter. Deku's eyes softened. He knew what it felt like to be looked down on for something you couldn't control. He smiled at her, a genuine, warm smile. Well, I'll be your friend, he declared. I don't need your money. All that matters is if you're a good person or not. He puffed out his chest a little. My name is Izuku Midoriya. The girl's eyes widened slightly, and a small, hesitant smile touched her lips. Really, she asked, her voice a little hopeful. Really? Deku nodded enthusiastically. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, or if you have a super strong quirk or, well, or not, he added, thinking of himself. What matters is being kind and doing the right thing. The girl's smile grew a little wider. Thank you, she said softly. That's really nice of you, Midoriya-kun. My name is Momo Yaoyorozu. They spent the rest of the afternoon playing together in the park. Momo showed Deku the intricate paper cranes she could fold, and Deku told her all about his favorite hero, All Might, and his dreams of becoming a hero himself. They laughed as they chased pigeons and took turns on the swings. For the first time in a long time, Momo felt like someone genuinely wanted to spend time with her for who she was, not for her family's wealth. Deku, too, felt a warmth in his chest having made a new friend who seemed to understand him. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, Deku said, Hey, Momo, this was really fun. If you want to hang out again, how about we meet here in the park next week? Same time? Momo's eyes lit up. Really? You want to meet again? Deku nodded enthusiastically. Yeah. I had a great time. And making new friends is awesome. Momo beamed. Okay. Yes, I'd really like that. They shook hands, a small but significant gesture of their newfound friendship. Just then, a sleek, black car pulled up to the edge of the park, and a tall, serious-looking man in a suit stepped out. Young Miss Yaoyorozu, he said respectfully. It is time to return home. Momo sighed a little but then turned to Deku with a smile. That's my guardian, she explained. He comes to pick me up. Deku's eyes widened slightly as he looked at the expensive car and the formal attire of the man. Wow, he said, a little surprised. You really weren't kidding about your parents having lots of money. He grinned. But hey, that's okay. I'll see you next week, Momo. Have a good day. Momo giggled. You too, Deku. See you next week. They waved goodbye to each other, both wearing big, happy smiles as Momo got into the car and Deku started his walk home, his heart feeling a little lighter than usual. As he drifted off to sleep that night, his mind wandered between the fun he had with Momo and the anticipation of his next dream trial. He felt a sense of determination bubbling within him. He was getting stronger, he had a new friend, and he was ready to face whatever challenges the dream world threw his way next year. He closed his eyes, a feeling of quiet confidence settling over him as sleep finally claimed him. And that is the end of today's part 1. Hoped you enjoyed, and if you want me to change the ship or maybe make it a harem, which isn't really my taste, but I'll do it anyway, I'll see you all later.